You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, host of BioTalk. We had the opportunity on April 23rd and 24th at the 4th Annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum at MedImmune to interview leaders within the region. Uniquely, they were members of academia, industry, and the federal government, which are all critical partners to helping our region grow. Please enjoy these interviews with these partners that will help the BioHealth Capital Region become a top 3 by 2023. I am with Todd Haim, Program Director for the SBIR Development Center at the National Cancer Institute, and SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research. Todd, welcome to BioTalk.
Thank you. Exciting to be here.
We understand the SBIR program is one of the purest forms of early-stage seed capital in America, but a lot of people are not aware of the magnitude of the program and what benefits there are to be in the SBIR program.
Yeah, and it's important to mention that the SBIR program of 20 years ago is very different from the SBIR program of today, and I think that's something that's really starting to grab hold in the community and understanding that it has changed a lot over time.
How long have you been with NCI and the SBIR program?
About 9 years.
9 years.
Time flies when you're having fun.
I'll bet it is. And what's the annual budget for NCI around SBIR?
So this year it will likely exceed $160 million. That includes STTR, the sister program, which is very similar to SBIR.
Right. That's the size of a nice-sized venture fund that you have access to. And that money would go, in an annual basis, how many companies would be able to be funded out of the $160 million?
On an ongoing basis, we're usually funding about 250 to 300 companies, and that equates to about 400 awards, because some companies will have more than one award. Now, some of those awards are multi-year awards, so we probably fund about 100, maybe a little more, new awards per year.
There are phases in the SBIR program, and you mentioned STTR. Talk a little bit about the differences in the phases, timing for them, and if I'm out there as a small business trying to apply, what is the average time it will take for me from the time I submit my proposal to an award? And I've just asked you 3 questions. We'll see how good you are at remembering them all.
Sure. So let me start high level first with SBIR and STTR. Both programs are very similar. The really main difference is that with STTR, there is a requirement to have collaborations with an academic institution, although in reality, most SBIRs we found do include collaborations with academic institutions. The phases and the budgets for both are very similar. So for both, there is a phase 1, which at the NCI can be up to $300,000 for most topic areas. And for phase 2 at the NCI can be up to $2 million for most topic areas. Now for SBIR, we also have a bridge award, which is a follow-on to our phase 2. And that's designed to incentivize partnerships with outside investors. So for those companies that complete a phase 2 and can convince an external investor to invest additional funds to match what the NCI will invest, then they can now request up to $4 million after the phase 2. And we just increased that, and then that solicitation just went on the street a couple months ago. But that $4 million would be competitive preference to get that award, would be based on that external investor saying if the NCI puts their $4 million of non-dilutive money, then we will put ours. And for that investor's $4 million investment, they're getting $8 million worth of work done at the company.
That's a heck of a deal. The other misconception people have is they think if they win an award, basically you write them a check. It doesn't work that way, does it?
Not quite that way. They don't get it all up front.
Right.
But there is a lot of latitude. We do consider, so much of our funding goes through grants. And with grants, we do consider them as grants, and we understand that science will lead to changes. So we are open to things like that. And there is a lot of latitude over the course of the award. And we work with the companies continually over the award. So we're always there to have these discussions. And I'll go back to the one question I forgot to answer previously in terms of time of award. That's another difference when I say we're not the same program that we were 20 years ago. We've really, over the past couple of years, worked on shortening that time across the NIH, whereas it was more like a year on average, and we're really trying to make it more of a 7-8 month process, and hopefully we can even lower that number more. It does depend a little bit on what application date the company is applying to and when Congress approves the budget and all that. So there is variance from date to date. But to give you an example, the April date just passed. So on April 5th, there was a funding date to apply for SBIR. And the vast majority of companies that get selected for that date will actually be selected this fiscal year, which means they'll get their money by September. So that right there will be a 5-month turnaround.
Is that commitment or money?
The award.
They'll get the award.
So they'll be able to start drawing down that money.
Sure.
Before the end of this fiscal year, so by the end of September.
So based on the amount of proposals you get on an annual basis, what percentage on a Phase 1 or a Phase 2 actually get selected to be funded?
So for Phase 1, year to year, it ranges from about 10 to 20%. And for Phase 2, it's more between 25 and 35%.
Okay, so they've actually proven something, so there's a greater likelihood if you have succeeded in the Phase 1 to get a Phase 2.
Exactly.
Right.
It's both that they've already been selected once, so there shows there's some interest, and also it's a bit of a self-selecting pool that the companies that will apply for Phase 2 are often the ones that feel like they have met their Phase 1 milestones.
So we're at the BioHealth Capital Region doing this interview, which really embraces Maryland, the District of Columbia, and Virginia. How does this region perform against other regions in the United States in being competitive to get NCI SBIR awards?
So I don't have those numbers handy, but I would be very interested if you were aware of what those numbers are for the purpose of the conversation. But it's something that we're starting to see more companies in this region apply. I've been talking to more companies, getting more calls from more companies in the region, trying to talk about applications and understand how to really be competitive. But I'd be interested to see if that's actually been borne out by the statistics.
Probably something we could look at together. But one of the things we're proud of at BioHealth Innovation is we have a pre-proposal assistance program where we retain consultants that we're willing to pay to work with a company to help put their proposal together. We only work with those that we think are commercially relevant, that really meet the requirements for an SBIR. And our success rate is now averaging 45% win compared to your 10 to 20 and 25 to 30%.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great.
So it proves that a lot of the people are scientists and don't understand the business model, the commercialization strategy, how to go to market, which I think is becoming a more important component to SBIR awards. Is that true?
It's a very important point in the application process, something that we look at when we make our decisions on which awards to fund.
Right. So what recommendations would you have for the listeners if they were considering to be applying for an SBIR with NCI?
The number one word that comes to mind is engage. Engage both with us in that we can talk to you before you apply. If you contact us well ahead of an application date, we'd be glad to meet with you, discuss what should be into your application, what we really think will be most competitive, and then also engage with the external resources such as the BHI application assistance program and all the other resources in this area. There's so much, and the companies have the benefit of being in this locality near NCI, and I really encourage them to take advantage of that. Our doors are always open, as are BHI's doors and so many other organizations in the area.
Well, I think it's really important about the engagement because there's a misconception that you're untouchable and you're willing to talk to anybody. You actually will have a meeting with people who, before they're going to submit their proposal, you can't tell them everything that they should put into the proposal, but you can give them some guidance, correct?
Exactly. And we can focus on, I always say the specific aims page is really the most score-driving page of the application. And by sending us that page, we can really get a sense of, are they framing it in a way that will be competitive? You know, what is that value proposition? And then also the aims themselves. Are they putting in the activities that we would normally consider funding through SBIR? And those are the types of conversations we can have at a high level before they apply that many companies have found very helpful.
Well, I know you have educational sessions. I know NHLBI does the same thing around the country. Maybe we can incorporate something between NCI, NHLBI, and next year's BioHealth Capital Forum, where we can get some of your experts, yourself, Matt McMahon, and other people engaged and do a session on federal funding that's really more a tutorial. Because generally we get the talking heads up there and talking about the program, but it really doesn't get down into the nuts and bolts about assistance. And so maybe that's something that we can add to the forum next year.
Yeah, I think that would be a great addition to the forum. And really, we do talk specifically on how to make your application most competitive. And I think that's something that probably would be of interest in the region. So I would look forward to that.
Super. Well, I've been talking to Todd Haim, who is the Program Director for the Small Business Innovation Research Program at the National Cancer Institute. Todd, thanks for being on BioTalk.
Thank you very much, Rich.
Hi, I'm back with Matt McMahon, who is the Director, Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute of NIH. Matt, welcome to BioTalk.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Boy, you have a long title.
Yeah, well, lots of things to do.
Well, tell me, what does the Director of Translational Alliances and Coordination do at NIC within NIH?
Well, at the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, we're really trying to encourage a real translational pipeline that takes basic science discoveries all the way through to the initial stages of commercial potential and hands them off in a real smooth way to the private sector for development into therapies and cures.
And the word translation in your title is different than a lot of people who work at NIH because they're not as much engaged in translational activities. Is that true?
I think it's becoming more common across NIH and other institutions to really try and take those basic science discoveries and incubate them a little more fully to really develop the business potential in parallel with the scientific potential of these discoveries so that we can really help them along further.
And I'm not going to be as naive as I could be, since we've had a long-term working relationship with NHLBI. But really, tell us a little bit about the portfolio of programs and the diversity of the types of activities you get engaged in.
There are really three main components to what we're working on in our office. The first is we manage the small business program for the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And that program at our institute provides about $100 million a year to small businesses to do prototype development and initial research and development. So we coordinate that program across all of our divisions, Heart, Lung, and Blood. All federal agencies with a large research budget have 3% of their budget set aside for this program. So many of the institutes and centers at NIH and many of the other federal agencies, too, have a small business program.
Great. What's another program?
So the second thing we do is we manage a network of proof-of-concept centers. And this network was conceived of about 4 or 5 years ago with the intention to create regional ecosystems that help academic innovators really recognize the commercial potential of their discoveries and start down the road of converting their science project to a product development project. So they do entrepreneurial education, they provide seed funding for projects, and they also connect innovators with the expertise and the resources in the private sector and in industry that can really help them learn what they need to do to start down the road of developing a product.
Is this what I would know as the Centers for Accelerated Innovation?
Yes, there's two parts of it. The NIH Centers for Accelerated Innovation, that program has 3 centers, one based in Boston, one based in Cleveland, and one that's composed of all of the UC medical schools. And the second part of the network is called the REACH program, Research, Evaluation, and Commercialization Hubs. And there's 3 locations there, Louisville, Kentucky, one based in Long Island, and one based in Minnesota. So collectively, there's about 32 institutions across those 6 centers around the nation.
Excellent. The third program?
The third thing that we're doing is something pretty new. The Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute is really trying to revamp how we support all of our translational research at the Institute. So it's really one of our enduring principles to have a balanced portfolio of basic, translational, clinical, and population sciences. And that translational piece in the past has really been kind of a patchwork quilt of different types of programs. And as an investigator or an innovator out in the world, it's been pretty hard to identify how you can get access to the funding and the resources that we provide. And we're trying to really streamline and consolidate that to just make it as easy as possible for innovators to jump in and get the help that they need to be successful.
And then also you have something called an OTAC. What is OTAC?
OTAC is just the name of our office, the Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination. And it's really a rather unique set of individuals in the federal government. So it's kind of like a little commercialization assistance center. We have people with real business and industry experience. We have 2 entrepreneurs in residence. We have an investor in residence, a full-time business development person, full-time regulatory person, and many of the other folks in our office also have experience working in business or in the biotech industry, and it really allows us to serve as a bridge between those academic innovators and the private sector much more effectively.
What you've designed almost sounds like you have a venture capital firm or a business development office in a large pharma.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. One of the things that's becoming much more common on the messaging side is for people to talk about the small business program as the largest seed funder in the country. So the National Institutes of Health has about $1 billion a year that we spend in that program, and we give that money to small businesses completely for free. It's non-dilutive funding, and it's really one of the most effective ways that these businesses can start building value in their products and in their company without having to give a piece of equity away.
And every institute within NIH, there's 27 of them, doesn't do everything exactly the same. So you're doing some things that are unique that some other institutes are not doing.
The institutes and centers of the NIH operate relatively independently, but as time has gone by, many of the institutes and centers have really recognized the value of this kind of translational research support and building out an infrastructure. And some of the larger institutes like the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Neurological Diseases and Stroke also have pretty active teams in place that do very similar kinds of things. So we try and collaborate across the institutes and centers also.
Based on the budget that is waiting to be approved, it looks like there's been some additional appropriations for NIH, about $3 billion. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, we're always happy to have more resources. The more resources we have, the more people we can help. But part of what we're trying to do is to take whatever resources that we have and use them more effectively and more efficiently. So we're really trying to squeeze commercialization outcomes out the back end of our program. So the NIH mission is not just in basic science discovery, it's turning that discovery into health outcomes for our nation. And so we're really trying to do a much better job of getting some more outcomes for the billions of dollars that we spend in research every year.
And did you believe Congress has greater expectations for that $30 billion or $33 billion that's going into NIH each year to see greater outcomes from that?
I think there's always pressure to demonstrate outcomes, and it's becoming much more common now to develop very clear metrics of success at the beginning of these programs so that everybody's clear on what we're trying to accomplish. And as we attack some of these bigger issues like the opioid crisis or even realizing the potential of regenerative medicine, there's a much more clear focus on what are we trying to achieve and accomplish.
We're talking here at the 4th Annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum, and we're in the second day now. What are your observations from what you're seeing this year versus past years?
Well, I think you've done a great job of really bringing the community together. We really believe that this kind of ecosystem approach is a very, very powerful way to help innovations move forward. You can see it across the country, not just in the big powerhouses of innovation, but in many other places, these ecosystems are starting to develop where you're bringing together the private sector, you're bringing together regional economic development agencies and combining that with the power of the federal government through the NIH and other federal funding agencies. And it's a really exciting time.
So we value our relationship with you, Matt, but what recommendations would you have for what we need to do better within the BioHealth Capital Region in the future?
Well, one of the things that we see in many of the really successful innovation ecosystems around the country is the availability for private financing to really take these projects forward into the private sector. So whether that be a really active angel investing presence or venture capital funding, and having that really tied in strongly to the ecosystem is a big indicator of success. And I think as that grows in this region and becomes more integrated with the activities of the NIH and some of the other early seed stage things that we have going on at the universities, I think that's really going to be a critical factor.
Well, that's a message we hear over and over again from everybody, and basically the federal and the public funding, whether it's at the state level or NIH level, only can take a company so far. Then we have to get the private sector or venture capitalist engaged to take them to the next step.
Yes, absolutely.
Any observations you'd like to close with on this really short interview we're having?
A meeting like this is always exciting because you have innovators themselves here who are just in the trenches doing the work and making those great discoveries. You have the universities represented. You have the local economic development agencies. You have the investors, the big companies. It's really a wonderful way to tie things together, and I really credit you guys for pushing this forward.
Well, thank you for the testimonial. We'll use you in our press releases next year about why people should come to the 5th Annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum.
Happy to do it.
Great. So we've been talking with Matt McMahon, the Director, Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. Matt, thanks for being on BioTalk.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this edition of BioTalk. Please join us again with a new episode featuring a new leader in the BioHealth Capital Region.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.